Righty, I am back. And I have some cool stuff. You might be like, this is the weird stuff, the cool stuff, the interesting stuff. I got something for you guys to expand on a position that really bothered me. I was curious about it. And I decided to go a deep dive into this. And we're going to do a deep dive into a basic endgame that's not so basic at all. Now, this position you see in front of you, it's a famous position from Endgame with king and knight versus king and pawn. And we all know that it is impossible for a king and a knight to checkmate a lone king on the board. But there are unusual circumstances where it is possible when the other player has material. And a knight checkmate usually actually requires, a sole knight checkmate requires some kind of smothering of the enemy king. So this position is an endgame you probably, most of you have no doubt seen before. I'm sure you've seen it. Hands up, everybody saying, this one is, if you've seen it, this is cool. I see that Knows All has seen this one. Yes, indeed, you're correct in your assessment of the situation. It is white's turn to move, and white to move checkmates in two moves. You've seen it before. You know that is pretty straightforward. The first thing that has to happen is you have to make sure this king has no moves. The pawn is trying to promote, by the way. So important for you to note that that is the direction the pawn is going in. So the move knight to f1 prevents the king from being able to run to the h2 square. And so black is forced to play h2. And now knight to g3 is checkmate. That's pretty much where most basic endgame books will take you. We're going to go a little bit deeper. Because there is a position, and we're going to get to it. But I want to walk you there because the complexities of it require that you deeply understand something first, a little idea first. And I'm going to show you the idea. So this one, knight to f1, followed by knight g3 is very important. I'm going to take you now to the next position, this one. And this one is white to move and win. Now, this amps up the position only slightly. White has to make the right move. So clearly, it's sort of like we backed up to the previous move. And so white has to make the correct move here. Well, white cannot allow this king to escape. Otherwise, there's never going to be a smothered mate. So the correct move, many of you will have guessed, is king f2. Obviously, you have to stop the king from running. King h1 follows, and now we have the same position we just saw, knight f1, h2, and knight to g3. So, not so bad. Now, one thing I want you to note, by the way, this maneuver of knight back to f1, the key to it is stopping this square, but it very critically attacks the g3 square. So I'm highlighting that because this is going to become a theme that we're going to cover over and over in the next few positions. So let's go to the next position, this one. Now, this knight is capable of controlling the g3 square on the next move. It's on a dark square, importantly, and it's capable of controlling g3 on the next move. That is the move knight to e4. This knight and this position is the first time we will see the theme play itself out over and over. This is the example, the model, but the model is going to expand itself. So here's the knight sitting on the g5 square. Again, the correct move is king to f2. You've got to stop the king from going to this g3 square. So king h1. We don't have the winning knight to f1 in this position, but we have a temporizing move. And that is the move knight to e4. That stops the pawn from advancing. Black would love to advance and create a stalemate, but cannot do so right now because of knight to g3 mate. So cannot do that. So black is forced in this position to go back to h2. So again, we must remember the g3 square is of critical importance. This is the square you want to be able to control in one move. All right. So king h2. And now we just need to finagle the position. Finagle. What a great English word. Who can tell us the origin of the word finagle? I'm a bit of a word lover, if you will. And I like this word finagle. Anyway, white's going to finagle from finesse. Anyway, white finagles the position we just saw before by playing this move, knight to d2. King to h1. And now knight f1, and we're back in business. We got the same position. h2 is forced, and knight to g3 is mate. So king f2 does the job as long as the knight can get to e4, and that's it. Foreign bagel. Seriously? All right, anyway. So king to h1, knight e4. Remember, you got to be able to control the g3 square. If you can control the g3 square in one move, you win. You don't believe me? Let's go to the next position. Look at this knight on g7, yo. That knight looks far. I mean, if I'm black in this position, I'm thinking this is a draw. This is done. The knight is miles away. No, actually, the knight can do what? It can control the g3 square. That's all it's got to be able to do. It can control the g3 square in one move. That's all it's got to be able to do. So we'll start the party. King to f2. King h1, and now might as well centralize. You could do it two ways here, but the best way, the most timely way, is just to play knight f5. We got g3 under control again. Sorry, you cannot push your pawn because we got the same mate. And as long as we can play this move to control the g3 square, king h2 is forced. And now we get back to the party position. Knight e3, king h1, knight f1, h2, and knight g3 is mate. Any square that can control the g3 square in one move will win. Any square. So let's take a look. Let's back it up. I'll just jump back to the original position here. The knight on g7 can control that square. Can control in one move, right? What other knight could do it? What other square could do this? Well, if a knight stood on this square, it could do it as well. So we're going to find all the squares. The knight on g7 can control g3 in one move. A knight on h6 could do it in one move. So that would be winning. So let's get all the squares. h4 could do it also in one move because we'd be able to play knight f5, right? So all these squares count. I'm going to rattle off all the squares. It's this one, it's this one, it's this one, because you can control by playing knight e4. It's this one, because you can play knight d2. It's this one, knight f1. It's also this one. Sorry for the arrow. And it's also this one. All these squares are winning. All these squares are winning. But what else is winning? If the knight stood on this square, yes, this square can control in one move. Not e5. We cannot control g3 in one move from e5. So that square does not count. This square does because we can control g3 in one move from here. This one does as well. All right, so let me redo this picture because I don't like that arrow on the square. So this, all these squares can control g3 in one move. This one, this one, this one, and this one. Is that it? No, we can extend it. A knight sitting on this square could control g3 in one move. After king h1, knight f5. A knight on this square could do it, and a knight on this square. If your knight stood on any of these squares, the white knight stood on any of these squares, after king h1, the knight simply controls g3 and then maneuvers through that maneuver we've already discussed, and we'll find eventually knight f1 and knight g3 will be mate. Interesting. All you have to know is, can my knight control g3 in one move? Obviously, if the knight stood on e5, it couldn't. And the game would be drawn because on the next move, black would play h2 after king to h1. So this square does not count. Now that we know that, let's go to the next position. Is this winning for white? You don't even have to calculate. You play king f2, you know you're winning because your knight can control the g3 square. We already discussed this position. King h1 is forced. Knight to e4. We control g3. You can't do anything. You've got to bring your king back. Otherwise, it's mate. Knight d2. King h1, knight f1, h2, knight to g3 is mate. I'm exhausting this position for you guys. Right now, you guys know more than 99% of all chess players about this position because people normally don't talk about this position in depth. But I'm going deeper. Let's look at this position. Here, the white knight already controls g3. But should we move our knight to a square that will then be able to control g3 on the next move? No, that's silly. In this position, the knight is already on the key square, or a key square controlling. So it's up to white now to play the right move. If white makes a mistake and plays king to f2, black now plays king to h1, and you're like, what did I just do? Like, you just kind of screwed up is what you did, because now check does not help. You can ring around the rosy all you want. The king goes back, and your knight cannot lose a move. If it were black to move, the game would be over. But in this position, it is white to move, and white can't gain the tempo he needs. Although, actually, in this case, I should admit, my bad. This position, white can get it done in this position. This is a win. And I spoke a little quickly there because white does have this move, a different setup that gets the job done, because now you can't play your king back, and h2 allows knight to f2 mate. Incredible that this knight is so versatile, actually. It's like literally so versatile that it can create this new setup. So back here, we play king f2. It turns out we do have that strange maneuver I just showed you. But the way to do it easily is to play king f1. And after king to h1 is now king f2. And we have the position that we wanted to have, because now your king has to go up, knight to d2, king h1, knight f1, h2, and we're back in business. The same thing happens in this next position. Exact same thing. We've already controlled in the g3 square, so don't go to f2. We'll be wasting time for sure. Maybe might cause a draw. But if you play king f1 first and now play king f2, now h2 is not possible. And now it's going to take a little time. We've got to get over there, but we're going to shift. Knight g7, and we know g7 is a good square because we can go to f5. We've seen this before. King h2, knight to e3, king h1, knight f1, shut the door, knight g3 is mate. Over and over. It's the same. It's the same. It's the same. All right? Now, I saw a question here. What are the odds of getting this in a game, though? What are the odds of getting any single position in a chess game? Any single position in a chess game. Like, what are the odds? Other than the original position or some opening position. What are the odds? It's not about the odds. I mean, what are the odds of getting a bishop and pawn versus a king, or bishop and side pawn versus a king, but your bishop is the wrong color? It doesn't matter about what the odds are. It's the understanding that you glean. It's not about practical questions. And when you ask a practical question about, well, could this happen in a game? It's not about that when you're studying chess. Even crazy studies where you have wild, problematic looking positions that could never happen in a chess game, like just ridiculous. Like you're up queen, rook, knight, and the pieces are all over the place. The one king is on the wrong side. And you know those chess problems I'm talking about. White to mate in 2, it never looks like it's possible. It doesn't matter. It's the lessons that you glean from these positions that matters. And by the way, this stuff has happened in chess games before. You can look them up. Very rarely indeed. But again, it's the lessons that you glean. By looking at something and understanding anything about chess you understand deeper is an edge in the long run. Very important to note that. You can study anything and improve, basically, in chess. It's important. All right, let's take a look at another position. We're going to go here. Now, this is a far more practical position, if you will. A far more practical position because we've added a black pawn. Now, most of us in this position would think, this game looks pretty drawn. If I hadn't spoken to you about this before, black's just going to bum rush, go to g2 and take the pawn. But now that we know what we know, we can now expand the position to this more 2 pawns on the board type position and say, wait a second, I have a way to win. I know of a way to win. And by the way, don't try to win by taking the pawn. Like this position here stops you from going after this pawn at all. So you're not even getting anything. So what do? Well, back here, we see the move, king b6. And now black is in trouble. Black can now go in this direction. Actually, I could have started it first. I did this just to show you this startup because black knows what's coming. So black tries to stay as long as possible here and keep the white king out. But white's king now heads for the pawn. And black has to stop that. So king f2, and now king d2. And again, you have to be careful, because if you stop the white king from going topside, then, for example, with king f3, then white could just simply play here and threaten to defend this pawn and then bring the knight into the game. So you have no choice in this position than to play king to g2. White follows, king takes, king f2, and we have the position. We could have known this even from the original position here, that white would get this, because this knight can guard g3 in one move, and we're going to do ring around the rosy and win yet again. Very interesting endgame, a practical position now, or I should say a more practical position. You know, this might show up in one of your games. You never know. But the concept is clear. The king stalking the other king. Killer Stapler calls it. That is indeed a very good way of putting it. The white king stalks the black king. And the fact that it's possible means you just put it in your pocket. You know, like rook and bishop versus rook. How many players have had the position rook and bishop versus rook? The odds are not great of that happening in your games, but it pays for you to know those positions. And we've seen it in commentary. We've seen it happen plenty of times at the high level players. How many of you have had a bishop and a knight checkmate a king? That alone, right? Bishop and knight versus a king. You say, I don't know if that's going to happen in a game. Well, how many things do you think are not going to happen in your chess games? Bishop and knight versus king is something you should learn. It's an important end game. That W maneuver, you should know it. You should be able to just chop that off. Chop, chop, chop. Got it. I know how to do it if it ever comes up in one of my games. But more importantly, it's the coordinating ability of the bishop and the knight that you learn when you study those types of end games. So important to know even the esoteric one, guys. So we just dipped into truly an esoteric position, I admit, but something that has some instructive value. I'm going to do the last position, and I'm going to say I had a discovery based on this study. After I got to this position and found a way for black to draw, I was really excited. And so I took this position to the endgame expert of the world. If you don't know, you should know. It's GM Carsten Mueller, who wrote Fundamental Chess Endgames with his partner. I'm sorry, I forget his name, but I mean, he's incredible. He's incredible. He's done incredible DVDs, like 14 DVDs on the endgame with ChessBase, and his knowledge is copious, like incredible. You got a question on the endgame, you go to that guy. I mean, he's just extraordinary. If you haven't, I mean, Fundamental Chess Endings is just like awesome. And he knows everything. And when I sent him this position, I said, listen, I just think I discovered something different, new, I've never seen before. Has someone else beat me to the punch? And he looked at it and sent me back an email within like a couple of hours. That's how crazy we GMs are, right? We're like, yo, what's up, man? Tell me what's going on. And he went, yo. Well, he's German, so it's probably a little bit different the way he said it. But he wrote back and he said, congratulations. I can't find anything in the databases. Nice maneuver. Looks like an Ashley special. I'm feeling good about that, y'all. I'm feeling good about that. We have the position in front of us. It is black to move. We already know if black dares to go after this pawn, being a boom, and take, white just stalks. The knight's already on the key square, one of the key squares, the game is over. Black dare not play this way, king e4, and go after the pawn. That's just not going to work. But what else to do? Because the white king is ready to come to the party. It's coming down, and it's going to defend a pawn. It looks like this is over. What to do? Well, black has a very specific maneuver. Instructive, y'all. Watch what's about to happen. Black plays the retreating move, king to f6. This move makes no sense. It makes zero sense. Like, why are you leaving this pawn? That's just going to help white. So white's like, thanks, check. Here we go. Your only move, king to e7, you must disrupt this knight. But the knight says, so what? I don't care. You're just driving me to squares that I'm going to like. King to d6, again the only move, disrupting the knight. So now white says, well, I can get out of this easily. Knight to a6. Headed to a square we know is winning. King d5, only move. Knight c5, only winning attempt. Now white is on a beautiful square, even preventing the black king from going to e4, and you can't chase the knight anymore. So king to d4, and white says, no problem. King to b4. And now white is saying, I dare you, I double dare you. Go in the direction of this pawn and see if I don't bring my king closer. And that's the end of that. Matter of fact, we'll just play out the line. You can't do this. We've already seen this. This just fails because after takes, king f2, king h1, knight to e4, controlling the critical square. And we know already that this, sorry, you can't play that because it's mate in 1. And we know if you retreat, just to be thorough, we already looked at this, that this win is very easy after knight f1 and it's mate. So after king b4, it looks lost. The game looks over. Like you just chased the knight to a square that, okay, g7 was winning, but c5 is winning too. No big deal. But now, and this is the moment when this gets good, y'all. And you know, we say this gets good. This is like the freak GMs talking. They're like, yo, that was nice. That was cool. This is the kind of thing you want to remember. You want to put in your pocket because this is useful for the future. Here, black plays black has already played several counterintuitive moves. Black plays yet another counterintuitive move, and that is the move king to d5. Retreating, leaving the pawn. Like, what are you doing? This is what we're trying to go after this. And you're just backing up. First you play this weird maneuver going this direction to this direction to this direction here. And now you decide that the right thing to do is back up again. But this boxes out the king, a la Dvoretsky. Mark Dvoretsky, the late great trainer, talked about this maneuver. He called it shouldering, like in hockey, where you shoulder him from getting at the puck. This king is saying, I don't want your king to come any closer to the position. And if you move the knight, you'll disrupt it from being on one of the key squares. Because the black king is ready to go here and take, period. So if the knight tries to stay nearby, let's say a move like this one, for example, goes here, check. Oh, we're going to win the pawn? Not quite, because of king to g2. And that's it. Black wins the pawn after the knight moves. King to d5. Counterintuitive. Normally you go in the direction of your goal, but here black's king is able to hold off a king and a knight from being able to win the game by understanding very deeply how this endgame is won by white. And that's the zigzag as Dangamir monks. Dangamir monks. That's like a gangster name right there. That's again, we like that name. We like that name. Zig instead of zag. Ziggy zow. So that's the extent of this endgame. Now I know a lot of people find endgames to be difficult, tricky, maybe not want to study them. It's important to have a collection of endgames in our pocket because when you start playing against tougher players, they're going to take you into the endgame. That's one of Hikaru's skills that Wesley So mentioned today. He said, the great thing about Naka, it's amazing, is how good he is in the endgame. Naka used to be a star tactician, but he turned his game around and now he plays great solid positions and he plays great endgames as well. And that is what is up.